Hello, everybody. 20 years ago this week, actually 20 years ago last Tuesday, Tim Berners-Lee and the CERN Institute in Geneva released the code of the web server and the web browser to the public. And I remember that day, because that day I was in the basement of the electronic engineering faculty of the university that I was attending in the town where I still live. And some of my fellow students came in and they booted up a computer and installed this piece of software that they called the browser. And we gathered around the screen and saw this, the CERN website. And my fellow students were clearly impressed. They were looking at this in awe. And at first I didn't really get it, what was so important about it. Because already for a few years, I had been online on the internet on a daily basis, and I already was able to connect to the various servers that were connected to it. And yes, I needed to use Unix command line statements to do that, but I already had access to what this browser seemed to be opening up. And only slowly it started to sort of dawn on me that what CERN and Tim Berners-Lee actually did was push this ability to not only see the internet, but also to extend it into the hands of individuals. And that is something that always has been very fascinating to me, because even as a little kid, I always thought that everything was somehow connected to everything else. If only I could see it and I only had the tools to do something with it. And here was the CERN Institute pushing these tools to extend and use the internet into the hands of everybody. In my professional life, I'm always sort of looking for that, trying to connect people that were previously unconnected and see what happens and how disruptive it can be if you push tools into those hands of individuals that had no access to those tools before. And today I want to discuss one of those new tools that are now becoming available to us all and can be sort of in our hands of all of us. And that tool is open data. And I would like to talk about three things. First, what open data is and what it is used for. Second, why our societies actually need open data. And thirdly, why you all need to get involved with open data. Now, open data is a very versatile thing. So in order to explain what it is, let me start with giving a few examples of what it already does. This is Usub's web, and it's a web service in Denmark. And if you go there, you give it your address, and within the time of 20 minutes or so, you answer about a dozen questions. And out comes a report that actually tells you how you can improve the energy efficiency of your home, of your specific home. And it is able to do that because it taps into different kinds of government data sources. And it not only gives you that way of improving efficiency, but it also provides a list of financing and subsidy options that are available to you, as well as a list of builders in your city that have the skills to do the work. At the same time, in Kenya, this application allows people to get better access to healthcare. This is an application that helps you diagnose symptoms, that shows you whether the doctor that you are visiting is actually a licensed physician, and it shows you where you can find the various places for different treatments. Wheelmap is another example. It started in Berlin and currently covers most of Europe. And what it does is shows you all the public venues and all the public places and buildings, and whether you can actually get in there with your type of wheelchair. And it's pretty well functioning already for Berlin, and as you can see on the map, there's some information in there already about Tallinn, even though there's not a lot of accessibility information in there already. Now, these are three very different examples. And what they have in common is that they all tap into what is called open data. So what is this open data that can do all that? Well, open data is public data that's being collected by governments or organizations at some point, usually governments. And then after they've used it, they publish it online for everybody else to use. And they do so without any technical, financial, or legal constraints attached to it. So everybody can use that data for whatever purpose they would like. That is what open data is. And removing those barriers, technical barriers, legal barriers, financial barriers, for people to access this data, that's an important aspect. Because removing barriers opens up all kinds of new areas of activities. It opens up the low end of markets. And those are precisely the places where exciting innovation can happen. That never happens in mature markets at the high end. It always starts at the low end of things. And so this is an opportunity to create innovation, and it will come from unexpected places and unexpected people. And that's where the impact of open data is. And it's because of that impact that already across Europe, governments are opening up that data. And it's also the reason why the European Union is heavily promoting open data with laws and regulations. Because they see a social and economic potential of over 140 billion euros per year. That's 2% of GDP across the EU. And we're already starting to see that impact happening in terms of jobs in Spain, in terms of company growth in Finland and elsewhere. But that impact is not coming from one big splash. It's not just one thing that creates that 140 billion euro impact of open data. The impact will come from small actions, small things that sort of start to grow from the bottom up. It will come from things that you and I do, from startups that are sort of stumbling upon new uses for the data that is already there. Because of that potential and because of transparency, governments across Europe are already opening up data. Ever since the first data portal was launched by the UK government in the fall of 2009, over 100 local, regional and national governments have opened up data portals. The Estonian government is not yet one of them. There is a site online already for like 2 years promising that there will be. But as leading as you are in e-government services right now, there's still a lot to do in terms of open data. So in summary, there's this abundance of data inside government bodies and other large organizations that was collected for one purpose, but that could be very valuable for other purposes and other uses as well, if only it would be opened up for every one of us to use. Now, that promise of open data, the promise of abundance, sounds great, but there's actually, I think, a much more compelling reason why we actually need open data in our society today. And that's because we live in a networked society. Everything is connected to everything else. What happens here today in Tallinn is seen and picked up around the world immediately. And what happens elsewhere today is immediately having effects here in Tallinn. And a key feature of networks is that if you don't share, if you don't open up to other nodes and people in the network, you simply don't exist to the network. Networks only exist if there is a connection through which interaction flows. So it's no coincidence that I'm up here talking about open data and that outside you're also hearing about open source and open access and open knowledge and open manufacturing and open design. Because all those things are part of, let's say, the open everything family that makes network society work. So when you look at open data, it is the open in open data that is more important than the data in open data. Even though it's data that you actually use, it's the openness that is new in it, because the data has been around for a long time already. It just wasn't pushed into the hands of every one of us. A second reason why our societies need open data is that because of this network society, everything is connected to everything else. We basically live in one big, giant, connected ant heap. And without new tools, we will be like ants. A single ant has no idea how its own actions actually contribute to the complexity of the anthill that it lives in. Without new tools, we don't have any real opportunity to understand the complexity of our societies. And open data is a way of increasing that understanding. Because open data opens up new perspectives that are not available to us as a single individual. Cities are an example. This is in Helsinki. where I was last fall, and I took this picture on the market, and you see my wife taking a picture in the background there. Now, when I'm walking on the market in Helsinki like this, I have no real idea of what is happening around me in the city and how the city as a whole functions. But open data opens that up to me as an individual, because this is also Helsinki. This is an overview of where people are taking pictures in Helsinki. The red dots are pictures like mine you just saw, made by tourists, and the blue dots are pictures taken by inhabitants of the city. And all of a sudden, new shapes emerge for me. Lively neighborhoods that might also be worth visiting, things that inhabitants think are worth seeing. And all of a sudden, I start to see the shape of the Anthill. So Hans Rosling, in his original TED Talk a few years ago, he was right. He said to truly understand some of the issues that we face in this world, we need to accept and embrace the complexity of the underlying data that describes those issues. But only, I think, if that data is also opened up to everybody, so that we can all use that data. If many people today feel frustrated or angry or confused because they see the complex world around them changing very fast and they don't have any real sense of control in their own daily lives, it's because we lack the tools to thoroughly understand our environment and the tools to act on that understanding. Open data is one of the tools that increases our understanding and our ability to act in our complex environment. And that's why the Dutch government in their open data plans explicitly connect tackling societal issues with opening up to data, for instance, to improve life in disadvantaged neighborhoods. If we want to tackle things like poverty, things like aging, the cost of our healthcare system, tackling the sort of nuclear fallout of what is happening in the financial system, then we need access to the data that describes those problems in terms that relate to our own personal lives and our immediate living environments. Every single ant needs to learn and understand how the anthill works. And that brings us to why you need to be involved with open data. Because every single ant, every one of us needs to understand how the anthill works. And across Europe and across the world, groups of people are meeting up to try and do just that. This is a picture from Bologna, Italy, last January, where people are meeting up to use open data to try and find answers and new solutions for problems and issues that they have in their own immediate living environments. And every day there's this thing called International Open Data Day, and last February it took place, and over 100 cities worldwide people came together to work on open data. And next year, February, there's again an International Open Data Day, and I hope that by then there will be groups here in Estonia also working on open data. I will be organizing these type of events in 38 cities next year, and I would love to see just as many communities in Estonia participate as well. Now the thing is, if you look at these events, and I've been to dozens and dozens of them, the people that show up there are typically not the ones that are sort of used to working with data. These are all new people. They are coming in because this data is being opened up, and they're using it to learn to solve issues in their immediate environment. So whether it is you want to make sure that if you go into a restaurant in New York, it's actually up to the correct hygiene standards and that you can avoid getting food poisoning, or whether it is that you've ever been frustrated in finding a cheap parking space in the middle of Amsterdam that is within walking distance of where you actually need to be, or whether it's something bigger, like trying to track the connection between every single company in the world, or tracking every single euro that every single government body is spending somewhere in the world. In all of those cases, what happened is that somebody had an issue, somebody had an itch to scratch, and they got their hands on open data that was connected to that and started to get to work and found new ways of addressing their issue. And that's basically what we all should do. Think of the issues that we are confronting and how open data might play a role in that. But that takes certain skills and it takes certain ability, something that we have to acquire. Now, we already know, at least the rest of the world knows since 2008, that there is a tremendous base for civic activism in Estonia. So it shouldn't be very hard for you to find an issue that also is able to attract a few others around you that are also interested in the same thing. And once you have your issue that you want to address, you need to get your hands on the relevant data that government holds on that and turn that into open data. Now, the good thing is you don't really need to change government first to be able to get your hands on the data. Because government is made up of loads of different people, so you only need one single civil servant to get things going, like that guy in the blue shirt in the top right. That's Patrick, and he works in my city's information management department, and he was the one single civil servant that I found with whom I could start open data in my hometown. And that's all it takes, one civil servant. So like me, you need to go out and find your guy in the blue shirt to get going. And once you have that, you found your guy in the blue shirt, you already knew your issue, the guy in the blue shirt gave you the data that you needed, then you can start work on the applications and the solutions that you want to build. And the good thing there is you don't need to start from scratch. You don't need to learn how to program from scratch. You don't need to learn how to do statistics at a university level from scratch. Because all kinds of tools are already out there that really help you do that from a more basic level of starting knowledge. And once you do that, you can avoid being an ant. You can start to understand the anthill that you live in. So do that. Avoid being an ant. Get your issue, get engaged, find your guy in the blue shirt, use open data, and understand your world. Thank you very much for your time and attention.